The distress signal crackled through the void of space, a desperate plea transmitted on frequencies that most civilized species had abandoned centuries ago. It was crude, primitive, and carried the unmistakable signature of a dying world. The signal originated from Kepler 442b, a small agricultural planet on the outer rim of the Vega system, home to the peaceful Zalathi people. Commander Vextar of the Hegemony battlecruiser. Dominion studied the readings with growing irritation. The Zalathi had been useful servants for over 3 centuries, their natural ability to cultivate food in harsh environments making them valuable assets to the Galactic Empire. Now they were begging for help against what appeared to be a simple pirate raid. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Korth from the communication station, his reptilian features twisted in disgust. "The Zalathi are requesting immediate military assistance. They claim their world is under siege by an unknown species." Vextar's 4 eyes rolled in annoyance. The Hegemony controlled over 40,000 star systems, and dealing with every minor conflict was beneath their attention. Unknown species? In our territory? Impossible. Run a scan of all registered civilizations in that sector. The bridge crew worked efficiently, their scaled hands dancing over holographic displays. The Hegemony had spent millennia cataloging every sentient species in the galaxy, ranking them according to their technological capabilities and threat levels. It was a simple system that had served them well during their rise to power. "Scanning complete, sir," reported the tactical officer. "No registered combat-capable species in that region. The only nearby civilization is—" The officer paused, checking his readings again. "Sol 3, designated as a primitive developing world. Classification, Level 2 technology, no spacefaring capability, no threat assessment on file." Vexatar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Sol 3? Those hairless apes barely discovered electricity a few of their centuries ago. Our last survey classified them as potentially suitable for agricultural labor once they develop basic space travel. They're probably still fighting with chemical propulsion and nuclear weapons." The distress signal continued to broadcast, growing more frantic with each transmission. The Zalathi spoke of massive ships appearing without warning, of weapons that defied understanding, and of a species that seemed to view warfare as an art form rather than a necessity. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving additional signals from other worlds in the sector. 3 more agricultural colonies are reporting attacks by the same unknown species. They're describing the attackers as bipedal, averaging 1.8 meters in height, with primitive-looking technology that somehow outperforms our defensive systems." This gave Vextar pause. The Hegemony's defensive technology had been perfected over thousands of years. Their energy shields could withstand the destruction of stars, and their automated defense platforms had never failed to repel an attack. If 3 colonies had fallen to primitives, something was seriously wrong with the intelligence reports. "Bring up the files on Sol 3, Vextar commanded. The main display flickered to life, showing a blue-green world orbiting a young yellow star. The data was sparse, collected during routine surveys conducted every few centuries. The planet's dominant species had shown rapid technological advancement, but nothing that should concern an advanced civilization. "Last survey conducted 127 standard years ago," the tactical officer read. "Population approximately 7 billion. Primary conflicts appear to be internal, with various factions competing for resources and territory. Technology assessment, primitive nuclear capabilities, basic satellite networks, early computer systems. Recommendation, continue monitoring. Potential for uplift to agricultural slave status in 500-1,000 years. Vextar studied the images of the primitive creatures. They looked fragile, with their soft skin and small teeth. Their military equipment seemed laughably crude compared to hegemony standards. And these are the beings supposedly terrorizing our colonies? Impossible. A new transmission cut through the bridge communications. This one came directly from Kepler 442b, but the voice was unfamiliar. It spoke in rough, choppy galactic standard, as if the speaker had learned the language recently. Attention hegemony forces. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Naval Command. Your agricultural colonies have been liberated from your control. Any attempt to reclaim them will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. We suggest you consider this a formal declaration of war. The bridge fell silent. Vexitar stared at the communications console as if it had personally insulted him. Did that primitive just declare war on the hegemony? It appears so, sir, the communications officer confirmed, his voice barely above a whisper. Scan the Kepler system, Vexitar ordered. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. The sensors reached out across the light years, penetrating the system with advanced quantum scanners that could detect a grain of sand in an asteroid field. What they found defied all logic and understanding. Sir, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking, I'm reading 13 large vessels in orbit around Kepler 442b. They appear to be crude in design, but the energy readings are off the charts. I'm also detecting 17 smaller craft conducting patrol operations. Show me, Vexitar demanded. The display shifted to show the Kepler system. The ships orbiting the planet looked like nothing in any hegemony database. They were angular, utilitarian, with visible weapon systems that seemed almost primitive in their directness. No elegant curves or aesthetic considerations, just brutal efficiency. Energy output analysis suggests these vessels could pose a significant threat to our cruiser-class ships, the tactical officer continued. But that's impossible, sir. According to our files, these beings shouldn't even have basic fusion technology. Vexitar's confidence began to waver. The hegemony had built their empire on the assumption that technological advancement followed predictable patterns. Species developed in orderly stages. First agriculture, then industry, then basic space flight, followed by centuries of gradual improvement until they reached levels worthy of hegemony attention. These humans had apparently skipped several steps. Communications, open a channel to Hegemony Command, Vexitar ordered. Priority Alpha, we need updated intelligence on Sol 3 immediately. While they waited for the response, another transmission came through from the human fleet. This time, the speaker sounded different, younger, and more aggressive. Hegemony Vessel, this is Captain James Rodriguez of the UEN Retribution. Your colleague seems to have gone quiet. We're broadcasting on all frequencies to make sure everyone in this sector gets the message. The age of your empire using peaceful species as slaves is over. We've been monitoring your communications for the past 6 months, learning your language, studying your technology. And we don't like what we've seen. Vexitar's blood ran cold. 6 months? If these primitives had been observing hegemony operations undetected for that long, their stealth technology was far more advanced than anyone had imagined. Impossible, Vexitar muttered. Our sensors would have detected any surveillance. Sir, the sensor officer called out, I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout this sector. Something is masking the true number of vessels present. This could be some form of advanced cloaking technology. The reply from Hegemony Command finally arrived, and it carried information that made Vexitar's worst fears seem optimistic. The updated intelligence report on Sol 3 was terrifying in its implications. Commander Vexitar, came the voice of Admiral Thexnor from the capital world. Recent intelligence suggests Sol 3 has undergone unprecedented technological acceleration. We believe they have achieved faster-than-light travel through unknown means. More concerning, they appear to have developed military capabilities specifically designed to counter our standard defensive systems. The transmission continued with details that grew more disturbing with each word. The humans had not followed normal technological development patterns. Instead of gradually improving their technology over millennia, They had experienced rapid advancement in specific areas related to warfare and space travel. Most alarming of all, they seemed to have studied captured hegemony technology and developed countermeasures. "How is this possible?" Vexitar asked the empty air. "Our technology is based on millions of years of scientific advancement." Another human transmission provided an unwelcome answer. "Hegemony forces, this is Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, Chief Science Officer of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We've been studying the wreckage of your scout ships that violated our system's borders over the past decade. Your technology is impressive, but it's also predictable. Your species has become comfortable with your superiority, and comfort leads to stagnation. Humans don't have that problem. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years, and we've gotten very good at finding weaknesses in seemingly superior opponents." The tactical display suddenly exploded with new contacts. Ships were decloaking throughout the system, far more than the initial scans had detected. The human fleet wasn't just present at Kepler 442b, they had positioned vessels throughout the entire sector. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "I'm counting over 200 vessels of various sizes. They've completely surrounded our position." Vexitar realized with growing horror that the humans hadn't just stumbled into hegemony territory. This was a planned operation, executed with military precision that spoke to centuries of combat experience. The agricultural colonies hadn't been randomly attacked. They had been strategically selected to draw hegemony forces into a trap. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen, hegemony vessel. You have two options. Surrender and prepare to be boarded for interrogation, or be destroyed where you sit. You have 60 seconds to decide." The bridge crew looked to their commander for orders, but Vexitar was paralyzed by the impossibility of the situation. The hegemony had never encountered a species that could challenge them militarily, let alone one that had been classified as primitive just over a century ago. "Sir," the communications officer said quietly, "incoming transmission from the Hegemony Fleet Command. Orders are to withdraw immediately and establish a defensive perimeter around the core worlds. This engagement is being classified as a first contact scenario with a previously unknown hostile species." Unknown hostile species. The words echoed in Vexitar's mind as he realized the full magnitude of the situation. The humans had been under observation for centuries, dismissed as primitives who might one day serve as useful laborers. Instead, they had been quietly developing into something the hegemony had never encountered before, a species that had weaponized their own primitive nature. 30 seconds, came Admiral Chen's voice. Vexitar looked around his bridge, seeing the fear in his crew's eyes. The hegemony had built its empire on the belief that superior technology guaranteed victory. These humans were proving that belief catastrophically wrong. "Communications," Vexitar said finally, "transmit our surrender." As the words left his mouth, Vexitar realized that everything the hegemony thought they knew about galactic civilization had just been proven wrong. The humans hadn't evolved beyond warfare, they had evolved because of it. And now they were bringing that evolution to the galaxy at large. The age of hegemony dominance was ending. And it was ending at the hands of the species they had most underestimated. The surrender of the hegemony battlecruiser sent shockwaves throughout the galactic empire. Within hours of Commander Vexitar's capture, emergency sessions were called on every major world. The Hegemony Council gathered in their crystalline chamber on the capital world of Nexital, their scaled faces reflecting the dim emergency lighting as they processed reports that defied all understanding. High Counselor Zethmar studied the tactical displays with growing disbelief. Red indicators marked dozens of systems where human fleets had appeared seemingly from nowhere. Agricultural worlds that had served the hegemony for centuries were now broadcasting messages of liberation. Worse still, the primitive humans seemed to understand hegemony military doctrine better than some of their own commanders. "Explain to me," Zethmar hissed, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had ruled star systems for over 4 centuries. How a species we classified as barely sapient has managed to outmaneuver our finest military minds. The military briefing officer, General Caxthevor, shifted uncomfortably. His 4 arms gestured at holographic displays showing the human advance. High Counselor, our initial assessments appear to have been inadequate. The humans have displayed tactical capabilities that suggest extensive military experience. Military experience? Zethmar's laugh was bitter. According to our files, their last major conflict was nearly a century ago. And it was fought with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. That information may have been incomplete, admitted Chief Intelligence Analyst Vorthek. We've been reviewing captured human communications. It appears their species has been engaged in continuous warfare for their entire recorded history. They've never known true peace. Every technological advancement they've made has been driven by military necessity. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony had achieved dominance through superior technology and coordinated expansion. Their military doctrine was based on overwhelming firepower and technological superiority. They had never encountered a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of war itself. "Show me the interrogation reports from the captured battlecruiser," Zethmar commanded. The holographic display shifted to show Commander Vexitar in a human detention facility. The proud hegemony officer looked broken, his usually immaculate uniform rumpled, and his eyes holding the hollow look of someone whose entire worldview had been shattered. "The humans didn't torture him," reported Vorthek. "They simply asked questions and cross-referenced his answers with their own observations. Commander Vexitar was cooperative." The recording began with a human officer, a female with short dark hair and intelligent eyes, sitting across from Vexitar. She spoke in fluent hegemony standard, her pronunciation perfect despite her species having never had formal contact with galactic civilization. "Commander," the human said, "we've been monitoring hegemony communications for several years now. We know about your empire, your technology, and your treatment of what you call lesser species. What we want to understand is why you thought you could continue operating near human space without consequences." Vexitar's response was barely audible. "We didn't know you were a threat. Our surveys indicated you were primitive, barely capable of interplanetary travel." "Your surveys," the human officer continued, "were conducted by automated probes that observed from the outer edges of our solar system. They saw what we wanted them to see. Did you really think a species capable of planetary nuclear warfare wouldn't notice alien surveillance devices?" The revelation hit the council chamber like a physical blow. The humans had been aware of hegemony observation for decades, possibly longer. They had deliberately concealed their true capabilities while gathering intelligence on their watchers. "Impossible," whispered General Caxthevor. "Our probe technology is undetectable to any species below Level 7 classification." The recording continued with the human officer explaining how her people had captured and reverse-engineered hegemony technology. "Your probes were sophisticated," she admitted, "but they operated on predictable patterns. Once we understood the principles, creating countermeasures was straightforward. Your technology is impressive, but it lacks adaptability. You've been the dominant power for so long that you've forgotten how to improvise." Zethmar paused the recording. Analysis. How extensive is human technological capability? Chief Science Advisor Mexthon stepped forward, his expression grim. "High Counselor, based on what we've observed, the humans have achieved faster-than-light travel through methods we don't understand. Their ships use some form of exotic matter manipulation that allows them to ignore conventional physics. More concerning, their weapons appear to be specifically designed to counter our defensive systems. Elaborate. Our energy shields are designed to deflect directed energy weapons and absorb kinetic impacts. Human weapons use a combination of exotic particles and what they call adaptive targeting systems. Their projectiles actually learn from our defensive responses and modify their approach in real time. The tactical display showed a human weapon in action, recorded during one of the recent battles. The projectile struck a hegemony energy shield and, rather than being deflected, began to pulse with different energy frequencies until it found one that passed through the barrier. "They're using our own defensive data against us," General Caxthvor realized. "Every time we defend against their attacks, their weapons become more effective." Zethmar's patience was wearing thin. "What are our options?" "Limited," Mexthon admitted. "We could attempt to negotiate, but the humans have made their position clear. They view the hegemony as a criminal organization that must be stopped. Alternatively, we could withdraw from all contested sectors and hope they don't pursue us into core territory." "Or?" Zethmar prompted. "Or we could attempt a full military response," General Caxthvor said reluctantly. "Mobilize the entire fleet and attempt to overwhelm them through sheer numbers." The debate that followed revealed the depth of the hegemony's predicament. Their empire controlled thousands of worlds and millions of ships, but those ships were designed to intimidate and control civilian populations, not fight a peer opponent. The humans, by contrast, had built their entire civilization around conflict and adaptation. As the Council argued, reports continued to arrive from across the empire. Human fleets were appearing in sectors that should have been impossible for them to reach. More disturbing, they seemed to know exactly which worlds to target for maximum strategic impact. Agricultural planets that fed entire star systems, manufacturing centers that produced essential technology, communication hubs that coordinated imperial logistics, all were being systematically neutralized. "They're not just attacking randomly," observed intelligence analyst Vorthek. "They understand our infrastructure better than some of our own administrators." The recording of Commander Vextar's interrogation provided insight into how the humans had gained such detailed knowledge. "They've been intercepting our communications for years," he had explained. "Not just monitoring them, but actually breaking our encryption and reading our internal reports. They know our troop strengths, our supply lines, our strategic weaknesses." High Counselor Zethmar felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries: fear. The hegemony had built their empire on the assumption that they were inherently superior to all other species. They had classified entire civilizations based on technological capability, treating sapient beings like resources to be harvested. The humans were proving that their entire philosophy was fundamentally flawed. "High Counselor?" an aide interrupted. "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting direct communication with the hegemony leadership." "Put it through." The main display activated, showing a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. She was middle-aged, with graying hair and eyes that held the cold calculation of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. "High Counselor Zethmar," the human said, pronouncing the hegemony leader's name with perfect accuracy. "I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen, commander of the United Earth Expeditionary Force. I believe we need to discuss the future of this region of space." Zethmar composed herself, drawing on centuries of diplomatic experience. "Admiral Chen, your recent actions have been aggressive. Surely we can resolve this through negotiation." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "High Counselor, we've been studying your empire for the past decade. We've seen your treatment of the Zalathi, the Corvin, and dozens of other species you classify as agricultural assets. From our perspective, the hegemony is a criminal organization that has enslaved entire civilizations. There can be no negotiation with slavers." "You don't understand the complexities of galactic governance," Zethmar protested. "The hegemony provides stability, protection, order to species that couldn't achieve it themselves. Stability built on oppression isn't stability at all," Admiral Chen replied. It's just delayed suffering. The species you've enslaved have their own rich cultures, their own potential for growth and achievement. You've stolen that from them for your own benefit. General Caxthevor stepped forward. Human, you speak of justice, but you're committing acts of war against a civilization thousands of years older than yours. We've achieved things your species can barely comprehend. Admiral Chen's laugh was cold. General, you've achieved stagnation. You built your empire by conquering species that couldn't fight back effectively. You've never faced an opponent that could match your technology and exceed your tactical capabilities. That's about to change. The transmission shifted to show multiple displays simultaneously. Human fleets were visible in dozens of star systems, their ships moving in coordinated formations that demonstrated military precision honed by centuries of experience. This is our ultimatum, Admiral Chen continued. The hegemony will immediately release all enslaved species and withdraw to your core worlds. You will provide reparations to the civilizations you've oppressed and submit to monitoring to ensure compliance. Any resistance will be met with the full force of human military capability. And if we refuse? Zethmar asked. Admiral Chen's expression grew colder. Then we'll demonstrate why humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've learned things about warfare that your peaceful empire has never had to consider. We understand that sometimes violence is the only way to stop greater violence. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. The hegemony had never received an ultimatum from another species. The very concept was alien to their experience. Analysis, Zethmar commanded. They mean it, General Caxthevor said quietly. Everything about their positioning, their communications, their tactical deployment suggests they're prepared for full-scale war. They're not bluffing. Recommendations? The general looked around the chamber before answering. High Counselor, I've spent my entire career studying military tactics and strategy. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of technological development. They've shown tactical flexibility that suggests extensive combat experience. Most importantly, they've proven they can adapt faster than we can respond. Your recommendation? Zethmar pressed. General Caxthevor's admission came quietly. Surrender. We're not equipped to fight a species that has spent its entire existence perfecting warfare. The High Counselor looked around the chamber at her fellow leaders, seeing her own fear reflected in their faces. The age of hegemony dominance was ending, brought down by the species they had most underestimated. 6 months after Admiral Chen's ultimatum, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The hegemony's surrender had been swift, but not without consequence. Entire star systems that had known only imperial rule for centuries suddenly found themselves free but uncertain about their future. On the former agricultural world of Kepler 442b, Ambassador Elena Rodriguez walked through fields that had once been cultivated solely for hegemony consumption. Now, the Zalathi farmers worked their own land, growing crops for their families and communities rather than distant overlords. The transformation was visible in their posture, their voices, the way they carried themselves with newfound dignity. Ambassador, called Velthon, the newly elected leader of the Zalathi Council. His translator device rendered his melodic language into crisp English. The human engineering teams have completed the water purification systems. Our people will no longer need to ration clean water. Elena smiled, watching as Zalathi children played in gardens that had been forbidden to them just months ago. How are the integration programs proceeding? Beyond our most optimistic projections, Velthon replied. Your educators have helped us establish schools that teach our own history alongside galactic sciences. For the first time in 3 centuries, Zalathi children are learning about their ancestors who built cities among the clouds before the hegemony arrived. The changes weren't limited to individual worlds. Across what had been the outer rim of hegemony space, newly liberated species were rediscovering their cultural heritage while adapting human technologies that emphasized sustainability and self-determination rather than extraction and control. In orbit above Kepler 442b, the UEN Resolution served as the flagship for what humans called the Liberation Fleet. The ship's conference room hosted daily meetings between human commanders and representatives from dozens of species, all working together to establish new frameworks for interspecies cooperation. Admiral Chen reviewed the latest reports with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. The good news is that most worlds have transitioned smoothly to self-governance. The concerning news is that we're detecting hegemony fleet movements in the core sectors. Captain James Rodriguez, Elena's brother and commander of the Retribution, studied the tactical displays. Are they preparing for a counterattack? Unknown, Chen replied. Intelligence suggests they're consolidating their forces, but we can't determine if it's defensive positioning or preparation for offensive operations. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, now serving as Chief Science Advisor to the Liberation Fleet, looked up from her data pad. There's something else. We've been monitoring communications from the core worlds, and there's mention of something called the Final Protocol. Our translation algorithms can't determine what it means, but the context suggests it's significant. The mystery deepened when former hegemony commander Vexitar, now working with human intelligence services as part of his rehabilitation, requested an urgent meeting with Admiral Chen. The once proud Imperial officer had undergone a remarkable transformation during his months of cooperation with human forces. "Admiral," Vexitar said as he entered the secure briefing room, his translator carefully modulating his words. "I need to warn you about something that even most hegemony commanders don't know about." Chen gestured for him to continue. "The Final Protocol," Vexitar explained, "is a theoretical military strategy developed by the Hegemony High Command centuries ago. It was designed to deal with what they called existential threats to galactic order. The theory was that if the hegemony ever faced an enemy that couldn't be defeated through conventional means, they would activate ancient automated defense systems left behind by the predecessor civilization." Dr. Morrison leaned forward. "Predecessor civilization?" "The species that ruled this galaxy before the hegemony rose to power," Vexitar explained. "Very little is known about them, except that they disappeared approximately 50,000 years ago, leaving behind artifacts and technologies that the hegemony has never fully understood." Admiral Chen felt a chill. "What kind of defense systems?" "Unknown. The predecessor sites have been sealed since the early days of the hegemony empire. The current leadership may not even know how to activate them, but if they're desperate enough..." The implications were staggering. The human liberation campaign had been based on superior tactics and adaptive technology, but ancient alien superweapons could change the entire equation. "How certain are you about this?" Chen asked. "The Final Protocol was classified above my security level," Vexitar admitted, "but I heard whispers. Some of the older commanders spoke of it as the ultimate guarantee of hegemony survival. If they believe their empire is truly ending, they might attempt to activate whatever the predecessors left behind." Within hours, human intelligence networks across the galaxy were focused on gathering information about predecessor sites. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The predecessor civilization had apparently been far more advanced than even the hegemony. Their technology operated on principles that current galactic science couldn't explain. Most concerning, they seem to have built their defenses specifically to prevent the rise of aggressive species. "It's brilliant in its simplicity," Dr. Morrison explained during an emergency briefing. "The predecessors created automated systems that would activate if they detected large-scale interspecies warfare. The technology was designed to enforce peace by making aggressive expansion impossible." Captain Rodriguez studied the data. But the hegemony has been conducting large-scale warfare for millennia. Why haven't these systems activated before? Because the hegemony's expansion was gradual and targeted primitive species, Morrison replied. The systems apparently only respond to conflicts between technologically advanced civilizations. Our intervention has created the first peer-level conflict this galaxy has seen in 50,000 years. The realization was sobering. Humans had entered galactic affairs to stop oppression, but their actions might trigger ancient defenses that could affect every species in the galaxy. As if summoned by their concerns, long-range sensors detected massive energy buildups in the galactic core. Something was awakening that had slept for millennia. High Counselor Zethmar stood in the ancient chamber deep beneath the hegemony capital, surrounded by technology that predated her species' rise to power. The crystalline walls hummed with energy patterns that hurt to observe directly, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with potential. "Are you certain about this?" she asked the elderly hegemony scientist who had spent decades studying predecessor technology. "The humans have forced our hand," the scientist replied, his voice shaking with age and fear. "Their military capabilities exceed our projections. They've liberated 40% of our outer territories and are advancing toward core systems. The final protocol is our only option." Zethmar looked at the ancient control interface, its symbols shifting in patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the three her mind could properly process. "And you understand how to operate it?" "Partially," the scientist admitted. "The predecessors encoded their technology in ways that require intuitive understanding rather than analytical knowledge. I believe the activation sequence will present itself when needed." The High Counselor placed her hand on the control surface, feeling ancient technology respond to her touch. The chamber filled with harmonic frequencies that resonated in her bones, and suddenly she understood why the predecessors had built these defenses. They had faced their own version of the hegemony, an aggressive species that sought to dominate the galaxy through force. The predecessors had chosen to disappear rather than continue the cycle of violence, but they had left behind safeguards to prevent future wars of conquest. The irony was not lost on Zethmar. The hegemony was about to activate defenses designed to stop species exactly like themselves. Across the galaxy, ancient installations began to stir. On dead worlds and forgotten moons, technology that had slept for 50 millennia started to awaken. The activation sent ripples through space-time that were detected by every advanced sensor array in known space. Admiral Chen received the alert while reviewing liberation schedules for the next phase of operations. "What exactly are we looking at?" she asked her science team. "Massive gravitational anomalies appearing throughout the galaxy," Dr. Morrison reported. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. They're emanating from points that correspond to mythical predecessor sites." On the tactical display, red markers began appearing faster than the computer could process them. Ancient installations were activating in every sector, their purpose still unknown, but their power undeniable. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony High Council. They're requesting immediate negotiations." Chen's expression hardened. "Tell them that ship has sailed. They had their chance for peaceful resolution." "Ma'am, they're claiming that continued hostilities will trigger automated defenses that could destroy all spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy. They're requesting an immediate ceasefire pending investigation of what they call predecessor protocols." The admission that the hegemony had triggered ancient alien defenses changed everything. Chen realized that her war for liberation might have started something that could end all interstellar civilization. "Get me a direct line to High Counselor Zethmar," Chen ordered, "and prepare a joint scientific team. If there really are ancient automated defenses activating, we need to understand what we're dealing with." As human and hegemony representatives began emergency communications, the ancient predecessor installations continued their awakening process. Across the galaxy, species that had never heard of either humans or the hegemony detected the gravitational anomalies and began their own investigations. The galaxy was about to learn that there were powers far greater than any current civilization had imagined, and those powers had very specific ideas about how interstellar relations should be conducted. In her command center aboard the Resolution, Admiral Chen faced a choice that would determine the future of galactic civilization. She could continue her campaign to liberate oppressed species, knowing that it might trigger ancient defenses that could destroy everything. Or she could negotiate with the hegemony, potentially abandoning billions of enslaved beings to save the galaxy from unknown predecessor technologies. The weight of that decision would have crushed most leaders. But Sarah Chen had spent her entire career making impossible choices, and she had learned that sometimes the right choice was also the most dangerous one. As predecessor installations came online across the galaxy, each one adding its voice to an ancient song of peace and justice that had been silent for 50,000 years, Chen realized that humanity's intervention had awakened something that would change the galaxy forever. The question was whether that change would be salvation or destruction, and the answer would depend on whether ancient alien intelligence could distinguish between wars of conquest and wars of liberation. The galaxy held its breath as humanity and the hegemony faced the judgment of a civilization that had transcended such conflicts eons ago.